Come on.
Hello, hello. We'll wait a few moments to get started here, but thanks to you, those of you who are joining already. Excited to have you here. See, a couple more people are joining. Well, we can go ahead and get started. And as other folks are joining us, we can welcome them. But greetings, everyone. My name is Reverend Grant Swanson, pronouns he, him, and I'm so excited to be with you today virtually. I work at Garrett-Evangelical Theological Seminary in Evanston, Illinois, as the Recruitment Coordinator. And I'm also a deacon in the United Methodist Church, serving at Urban Village Church in Chicago. It is such an honor to be here with all of you, and thanks for choosing to come to today's session. I hope can be a life-giving experience for you. And before we jump into the nitty-gritty of today's session, I want to make a quick disclaimer about where I work, Garrett Seminary, and seminary in general. If you're familiar with seminary, you might think of it as a place that people go to become pastors in churches, and that's true. About 40% of our student population has that goal. But there's a lot more to seminary. With our 5 master degree programs, 2 doctoral programs, and numerous certificate and non-degree programs, we're really an institution that trains people to be leaders in their churches, communities, and the world, no matter their occupation. Pastors, chaplains, teachers, clinical therapists, interfaith spiritual directors, activists, doctors, lawyers, scientists, all people can find a place at seminary. If you're looking for a way to really integrate and root the ministry work that you do in a firm foundation in theology and biblical interpretation and what it means to be a follower of Christ. So at the end of our time together, if you'd like to learn more, let's chat. Please email me directly at grant.swanson@garrett.edu. And I also wanted to let you know before we get started that there will be some time spent in reflection today. So grab a pen and paper or however you like to reflect and take notes. And then we'll spend some time engaging in the chat feature of Zoom. So that's going to be a little different. We're going to also have question and answer time towards the end. So if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer feature because I don't want them to get lost in our chat reflection later on. So, and if we do end up running out of time before we get to your question, the question and answer, please email me anytime or connect over the Whova app. My email once again is grant.swanson@garrett.edu. But enough of that, let's get started with a time of prayer. Go ahead and join me in an attitude of prayer. God of goodness and love, thank you for the opportunity to be here today with this community of beloved queer folks and fierce allies. Please bless the words of my mouth and the reflections of our hearts, and may they lead us to self-love, the affirmation of your call to vocational ministry in our lives, and the spirit-empowered audacity for us to pursue that call. Amen. So as followers of Christ, we are called into the vital ministry work of the radically inclusive gospel message of Jesus Christ. And for many of us, that involves being lay leaders in our churches and faith communities, finding ways to live into our vocational ministry through our occupation, or seeking ordination in a particular denomination. These avenues of ministry are deeply rewarding and require faithful intention and effort to realize. However, navigating these avenues of ministry and leadership can be particularly challenging for LGBTQIA+ Christians who often encounter structural and intersectional opposition to our full involvement in communities of faith. This session is going to provide affirmation in vocational ministry, tools to discern where God may be calling you in ministry, and tangible resources for navigating unjust and discriminatory lay leadership or ordination processes. Move to the next slide. And this starts by naming one important reality and affirmation. You are called. We are all called. We are all called into ministry work as followers of Christ, whether we are ordained or not. As Christians, we can understand this call to ministry through the lens of vocation. We live in a society that's very obsessed with occupation. What do you do? But I want to really spend some time reorienting towards vocation rather than occupation. So, what is vocation? The term vocation refers to the belief that you can serve God through your career and anything that you do. During the Protestant Reformation, reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin challenged traditionally held views that in order to most fully serve God, you had to dedicate your life to the priesthood. Instead, they developed a notion of vocation in which you could serve God through your career. Some synonyms you've probably heard for vocation include calling, mission, or purpose. And some contemporary voices that I think have blessed and expanded our understanding of vocation include Reverend Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon, who said, vocation is doing the work that your soul must have. What is it that brings your soul to life? What enlivens your spirit? That is where you can find vocation. And Frederick Buechner says, vocation is the place where our deep gladness meets the world's deep need. So thinking about what enlivens our spirit, our soul, where does that also connect with the needs that we see in the world around us? And finally, Howard Thurman says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So what enlivens your spirit, what brings you joy and life, go out and do that. And that will enliven and meet the needs of the world around you. So as we're thinking about vocation, there's also a process that we take to figure that out. And we'll spend some time doing that today called vocational discernment. And if discernment is just this tools and strategies we use to figure things out, vocational discernment is figuring out what it is you're called to do, figuring out what enlivens your spirit. So we're going to actually spend some time today in a vocational discernment process itself. We're going to think through our vocation and create intentional space to reorient away from an occupation focus to a vocation focus. And amidst the busyness of life, I want this to be a spiritual practice that you can take with you to help pause and ground in the why of what you are doing. So we're going to actually take a few moments in a spiritual practice together. We're going to move through a series of questions fairly quickly, but the goal is for you to have this spiritual practice to take with you for your own individual prayer devotional time in the future. So we've actually uploaded this PowerPoint into the event page, so you'll be able to access it and spend more time on your own with this spiritual practice, since we'll go through it pretty quickly today. But also, please feel free to connect with me over Whova or email me at grant.swanson@garrett.edu if you want to talk more about it. But let's move into our first question. So we're going to actually take 2 minutes this question. I want you to write a 6-word mission statement about who you are now, or aspirationally who you would like to become. So think of this 6-word mission statement. If you got up in the morning, you looked above your mirror, you'd see these 6 words and you'd be like, yes, this is my jam. I'm ready for this day. I've got it. So we'll go ahead and spend 2 minutes thinking about this, writing or taking notes in your app on your phone, whatever works for you in this time of discernment. So we'll go ahead and spend 2 minutes with this question. The time is yours and it starts now. Take about 30 more seconds. As we exit this time of reflection, I would love to hear from you. If you feel comfortable and confident sharing, I'd love to see some of the mission statements that you all have written. And of course, these are drafts. You are not tied to these. Vocation, discernment changes and grows constantly over our lives from day to day, from moment to moment. So you aren't, what you type in the chat, you aren't stuck with forever. But I'd love to just hear some of the things that y'all are thinking through if you want to share in the chat. I know for me, a mission statement that I abide by as a deacon, as a person in the church and the world, is bridge builder towards communal, holistic well-being. Thanks, Mars. Create sacred space to reduce suffering. Love that. Love that. Beautiful. Creating the space. George, thank you. To love all fully and radically. Beautiful. Yes. Court, I'm a bridge builder and advocate. Emery, anti-racist, spiritually curious life partner. Brian, leader of radically inclusive movement. Josie, Jamie, beautiful. Yes, yes. Oh, and I just hope you guys are all of you taking a look at what you're seeing here, and see the hope and excitement that we each have our own unique mission statement, but together collectively see the power that we have here in each of our unique calls. So I hope you can find some joy, not only in what you have taken in reflection, but in the camaraderie and community that we have here. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and move to our next question. And this all builds on one another. So please keep this mission statement at the forefront of your mind. Have it interact. Look and see where you're seeing interconnections and patterns. So the next question that we'll spend some time with is thinking about our faith or value system that guides our life. What role does faith or the values that guide us play in your life? And how do maybe the decisions that you're making in life line up with your mission statement and your relationship with God or those values? So we'll once again go ahead and spend about 2.5 minutes with this question. So once again, we'll spend 2.5 minutes with this question and then engage a little bit in the chat feature. The time is yours. Take about 30 more seconds. Wonderful. As you are exiting this time of reflection, I'd invite, once again, if you don't need to share everything that you spent time thinking about, but if you feel comfortable, would love to hear what's some sort of reflection that stuck out to you. What's something that you think might be life-giving to share with others? I know for me, I always like to share, I actually drew a tree. Sometimes reflections are best for those of us who are visual learners to do in pictorial view. I always think of faith as my root system that grounds me, that really nurtures the trunk, which is then the choices, decisions, and actions I make. And then I can look to the leaves, to the fruits, to the outcomes, and what are the outcomes and fruits of those decisions and actions? Are they life-giving? And if not, maybe I might need to spend some time in reflection to see where my motivations or other things can be reflected. So I'd love to hear from you all in the chat. What are some things that stuck out to you in this time of reflection? Jamie, standing with those who don't have a powerful voice in the church and challenging those who do. Yes. And I see direct connection with your mission statement right above, loving, affirming, and supporting people. And I think that's really powerful to be able to see that juxtaposition where that connection between what drives you and how that shows up in your faith. Thank you, Jamie. Anyone else? I know this can be a more vulnerable, sensitive question. Faith reaffirms that we're all beloved by God. Court. Yes. And Wesley terms. Yes. Bringing in John West, Methodist over here. Love me some Wesley. Yes, thank you. That's beautiful. George. Yes. Yes, Les. Time to faith work, realignment. Josie, stories, authenticity. Yes, this is beautiful, inspiring. Oh, I've got to capture this chat. Y'all are amazing, inspiring. Wish could be with you in person. Brian. Yes, yes. My faith leads me to believe by following Jesus' example, I can make a difference in the world. Amen. Thank you all so much for sharing this testimony, this interconnection between our mission and our faith is just so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And in this time now, we'll next move on to our next question. Thinking if some of you are in school, if some of you are working, what maybe do you have currently or in the past studied? Or what are your current and past jobs? And what I want you to think now that you've had the mission statement, your faith and values, how do these studies and jobs help you pursue that mission? I think so often we put occupation first and primary, right? But in whatever we do, we have opportunities to live into that mission and those faith values. So even if you see your job or current studies as a way to pay the bills, where are the opportunities to maybe engage with that mission statement? So we'll go ahead and spend about 2 minutes with this question. I know there's a variety of questions on this page. I invite you, whatever interests you the most, dive into that. Whatever is going to be most life-giving and helpful to you in answering this question, I invite you to do that in these 2 minutes. The time is yours. Take about 30 more seconds with this question. As we've done in the past, if there are any insights that came out to you in this question that you'd like to share with the community, please feel free to do that in the chat. But one thing I do want to mention with this question is to make sure that we note that vocation, discernment, life, it's not linear. We have a cultural narrative that says that if we start with point A and move through these proper channels, it will lead to outcome Z. That is false. Life is messy. Life is non-linear. That is part of the human experience, and part of the beauty of being in faith with God and being in community is to journey with one another through that messiness. So I just want to make sure as we're doing this process that we don't get that non-linear, that linear fallacy mixed up in this. It's messy. That's why we have practices like that, like this, and why we come together. So anybody have any thoughts that they want to share in the comments section before we move to the next question? Jamie, choral music, yes. Oh, I love that. George, choral too. You two might want to connect. Wonderful. Yes. Love it. Thank you. Thank you for blessing us with these thoughts, and I love this potential for connections and support as well, in commonalities and areas of support. So thank you. So we'll go ahead and go to the next question, which is thinking about our chosen family, thinking about allies, thinking about mentors and resources. Who are the people and resources who have supported you as your full self throughout your life and faith journey? Who are your chosen family, the people that you have gathered around you to support and care and nurture you? What tangible things have they said or done to demonstrate that support? What are the things that they have done to say, these are my people. These are the people in my chosen family. How have resources or supports helped you to live into your call? And how do these communities of support and support resources connect with your mission, vocation, and faith values? And what supports might you need as you move forward in your vocational discernment journey? There's a ton of questions here. That's intentional. In the 3 minutes we'll spend with this question, you're not going to get these questions all answered. So I invite you, what's something that sticks out to you? What's something that's speaking to your heart and soul right now? And just dive into that question. Like I said, this PowerPoint is on the event page. So I really hope that you will come back to this, make this practice your own, engage with other questions. But right now, just engage with what one of these questions is really sticking out to you right now. We'll take 3 minutes with this question. The time is yours. Take about 30 more seconds with this question. Wonderful. There's probably a lot more that you want to write or think and process about. That's the beauty of this, is hopefully it's something you can take with you. But I know for me, as you're thinking, if there's something you want to share with the community, if you feel so called, I know for me, I kept coming back to words that showed up in my mission statement. So wholeness, communal well-being, and for me, the people who are a part of my chosen family are the people who have accompanied me in me finding that for myself, finding wholeness and well-being for myself. So in a way, the folks in my chosen family are the people who have embodied that mission statement to me, so I can go out and be a person who helps co-create that in the world. I see Brian. Yes, with your mission, helping churches to become more inclusive, co-partners with you along that journey. Amazing. Wow. Yes, yes. Being able to see how important it is to have those supports and co-conspirators in that mission, in that journey. Jamie, your partner, yes, and friends, co-workers, that's awesome. Josie, spiritual director, yes, yes, so huge. If anyone here does not have a spiritual director or would like to know more about spiritual direction, I'd love to chat about it. Hit me up anytime. Thank you, Emery. Wow, yes, wow. Folks actually living into their support by being willing to stand up to wrongdoing and make changes in their life. Powerful, powerful, powerful stuff. Thank you, Emery. There's so much more to say, but we have 2 more questions. So we'll move on to our next one. This question, we would be remiss to spend some time thinking about our vocation, thinking about discernment, without taking into consideration the wild 2 years that we have lived and are currently living through, the very reason why we are here virtually and not in person, which is the pandemic that we have lived through, the 2 years of cultural, social turmoil that we've lived through, the personal impacts that has had on us. So the question here is, how has the past almost 2 years challenged or transformed or clarified your understanding of mission, vocation, and faith values? Thinking back on your mission statement, faith values, education, work, your chosen family, all the questions we talked about previously, how has the last 2 years had an impact on that, for better or for worse? There's a lot you can engage with here. We're only going to spend 2 minutes with it. The time is yours. Take about 30 more seconds with this question. We're actually going to jump right into the next question. The next question, any good spiritual reflection itself, spend some time thinking about the very process that you just gone through. So this spiritual process, the spiritual discernment process, what was it like for you? What did you notice as you worked through this discernment process? Was it life-giving? Was it healing? Was it easy where you're like, I do this kind of thing all the time? Was it boring? Was it frustrating? What was it like for you? And in the process of thinking through what this process was like for you, or maybe if there were some patterns or themes that stuck out to you or insights that you learned, I just want this to be some intentional time and space to make those connections and make those conclusions before we move on with the rest of our conversation. So we'll go ahead and spend 2 minutes in this question. The time is yours. Take about 30 more seconds. Wonderful. So as you're closing and concluding this time of reflection, if there are any thoughts from the previous question about the past 2 years or about this process reflection that you would like to share with the community before we move on, I invite you to do so in the chat. I think this is such an important spiritual practice to ground the rest of our discussion. Because the central piece of this is that our call is uniquely ours. And although it is important for us to be in conversation and collaboration with the community of folks around us, it's also important for us to have this intentional time where we're able to ground and root ourselves in the why. So I hope that this reflection has been helpful, and would love to deliberate and chat with you on a one-on-one basis after today. But any concluding thoughts in the chat before we move on? Wonderful. George. Yes. exhausting. Yes, the liminal space of waiting on next steps. That, yes, that, I think that is a perfect depiction of what many of us have experienced over these past 2 years. Thank you for putting that so eloquently, Jamie. Strength of calling. Yeah, great. That is wonderful to see that affirmation and strength in this time, especially the uncertainty and volatility of the time in which we've lived through. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Brian. Happy to help. I hope that this can be something, Brian and others, that you're able to take with, adapt, change it. I know some folks like to add in thinking about more specifically about relationships or other aspects of their lives. So yeah, please make this your own. Josie, crystallizing, fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. This is so important to root what we're doing, to be affirmed and reminded of our call to vocational ministry, and have spent some time thinking and discerning about our call, because we're going to focus on tangible resources and an action plan now for navigating unjust and discriminatory pathways that are set up to challenge our pursuit of this vocation within the institutional church. So I think it's just so important to first ground ourselves on the why. So, oops, sorry, skipped forward a slide there. In the face of unjust and oppressive systems and structures that are designed to exclude, punish, and harm queer folks, there is no right way to maneuver these systems and structures. I think I saw in the Whova app some questions around discernment of how to deal with these unjust systems. And I think that it's important to realize that every pathway we take amidst these unjust systems is uniquely ours to take. The path that you follow is deeply personal, vulnerable, and guided by the Holy Spirit. You are called in the ways that God is leading you to pursue that call in the face of unjust and unfair paths, systems, and structures is deeply personal. Folks may have lots of opinions about how you should navigate this process or what they think is the right way to maneuver this process. And I'm here to tell you to take what they say with a grain of salt. The problem is not the ways in which we queer folks maneuver the oppressive systems and structures, but the oppressive systems and structures themselves. We can only do the best that we can in the face of this adversity to discern and pursue God's will. And I thought it'd be helpful, maybe, hopefully, to kind of get a snapshot through my own personal testimony to give you a feel for how this really is a deeply personal process. So when I first started the ordination process as a gay married man in a denomination that denies the spirit-led calls of, quote, self-avowed practicing homosexuals, end quote, I quickly learned that there was no right way to maneuver the unjust paths established in the ordination process. And so, forced to exist within this structural denial of my call to ordained ministry, I was able to proceed forward in a conference that opened doors to queer candidates. However, our conference had never seen an openly married candidate complete the process, open about their marriage in all the different places where that comes up. Some may see this as brave, but I see it as reluctantly following God's call and awaiting the church's choice to witness my ministry fruits and say yes or no. So this was my call amidst an unjust path. I've had colleagues and friends who've had to maneuver in less overt ways, and that's been their call, leaving particular questions blank on official documents or answering interview questions indirectly. And that's okay. The unjust path is the problem, not the ways in which oppressed folks are forced to maneuver those paths for safety and security. I had the privilege of a conference that witnessed my ministry fruits and said, yes, I'm a fully ordained deacon in the Northern Illinois Conference of the United Methodist Church who is gay and married. Woo! But sadly, many of God's queer children across the globe encounter rejection, emotional and spiritual abuse, violence, and the denial of their God-ordained call. And we must not rest until this sin against God's beloved community is ended, and we are recognized as God's beautifully queer and called children. But until that time, we journey on knowing that we are called as God's beloved children. No matter what the church, the world says, we are called. And there is not a right way to maneuver an unjust path. We can only do the best we can in community, in fellowship, along our discernment path with the Holy Spirit and the colorful cloud of witnesses and supports cheering us on along the way. And with that, I do want to provide some tangible resources and things to think through as you are engaging with these unjust paths. First of all, know your denominational, conference, local church, pastoral leadership stance on key LGBTQIA+ questions. Churches can often seem affirming due to commitments to social justice and welcoming language, but when push comes to shove, their stances and outcomes may not reflect that presentation. So to avoid the painful blindsiding and disappointment that we experience when churches disappoint us, know where they stand. And some questions that you'll want to find out as you're thinking through and discerning is, where do these churches or denominations or conferences or pastoral leadership stand on performing same-sex weddings, ordination of openly queer clergy, membership for LGBTQIA+ congregants? Are there leadership regulations for LGBTQIA+ persons? And personally, what are your boundaries? What of this nonsense are you willing to work with? And what is a hard no? Where they stand on this, I'm out. So know where they stand on these issues and know what is your hard no. Next slide. Where can you look to figure this out? In a lot of church presentations, they are intentionally vague on a lot of these questions. So one place I like to make people aware of is a website called Church Clarity. It's been around for a few years now, but it is still growing and expanding because it is completely voluntary for churches to be included on this website. The goal of Church Clarity is not to say a church should stand a certain way on inclusivity. What their claim is that a person should be able to know where a church stands on inclusivity. So they have a scale on one end saying this church is transparent about being fully inclusive and what that means. And then on the other end of the scale is this church is fully transparent in being exclusive and knowing exactly where that stands. The middle is not what we often hear of thinking moderate and centrist. No, the middle is these churches are not clear on where they stand. So if you are going to go to one of these churches, know that their outward presentations do not specifically indicate where they stand on inclusivity or exclusivity. Some other places to look are on church websites. Look in the About Us, What We Believe, Statement of Faith, Doctrinal Beliefs. You can find a lot of stuff when you dig there. But I do want to note, often individual churches, especially individual churches that are a part of maybe a mainline denomination or a larger denomination, will not explicitly display their beliefs on their website. So in that case, what I recommend you do is identify what their denomination is and go to the denominational level website resources. And there you will be able to find where they stand on all of these issues. Next up, and so important as you're maneuvering this process, is know your support system. So personal care, know who your chosen family are, and make sure they know and can be journeying with you through this process. Know who your allies are, your supporters, your mentors. Bring this group around you so that when times are hard, when things are exhausting, when someone says something violent and horrible, that you can have a place to go to be in safe, comforting space. Spiritual care. Who are the pastors, the congregants, if you're at a church, spiritual director, who can be not only loving and affirming and supporting you emotionally and physically, but also people who can be tending to your spirit, to your soul. And finally, mental health. Have a counselor, have a therapist, find a mental health care support so that you can be processing the compounding issues that often forms and reveals itself as trauma. So know your support systems, have your support systems in place. Because if you are not able to be taken care of in your heart and hearts and your soul of soul, you're going to have a hard time maneuvering this process. You've got to take care of yourself and know your boundaries. Next up is ordination and lay leadership resources. So there are countless resources to help Christians discern vocational call, lay leadership, and ordination, but these resources rarely address the additional challenges, barriers, and discrimination LGBTQIA+ Christians will often experience during these processes. As a result, I want to focus here on providing specific resources for LGBTQIA+ Christians as they discern and pursue their vocational ministries. So on the denominational level, find the organizations and programs that are around inclusivity. I've listed a couple here for the Methodist Church Reconciling Ministries Network, for Lutheran Reconciling Works, Trans Episcopal, for the Episcopal Church, and other denominationally affiliated agencies. Many churches have them, many denominations have them, and if a denomination explicitly does not have them, then that might be saying something about where they are standing on the question of inclusivity and exclusivity. Seminaries. What supports do seminaries have for LGBTQIA+ students? I can speak explicitly to my experience at Garrett. Do they have an area of study? We have an LGBTQ studies program. What does the seminary say about inclusivity? What are their public-facing statements? We have a seminary commitment of support to LGBTQI+ students and candidates. And is there any financial support? At Garrett, we have LGBTQIA+ specific scholarships for folks, saying that the church, seminary, the ordination process, lay leadership has been a place that has oppressed and harmed queer folks throughout history. So it's important that we now try to repair by having financial supports for queer students. Next, what are some national support agencies that might be in your area? Thinking about the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, PFLAG, National LGBTQ Task Force, Q Christian Fellowship, here we are, Reformation Project, that can not only provide you tangible resources as you're maneuvering this process, but also if you are a leader who's helping others through this process, that you have resources that you can be providing as well. And get to know the local LGBTQIA+ communities and individual supports in your area, like local chapters of PFLAG, GLAD, Trans Youth Equality Foundation. Making those local connections with the community is vital to your health and well-being and your ability to be able to provide those resources to others. So, as followers of Christ, we are all called into Jesus's radically inclusive gospel ministry work. And for many of us, this will look like being lay leaders in our churches and living out our vocation within our occupation. And for some of us, this will look like a calling to ordination. And I really hope this session today has been helpful in a time of affirmation, a time of discernment, resource sharing. I've loved getting to know many of you in the chat And I know many of you have even far more resources than what I included in this PowerPoint, and we really want this to be a time of communal gathering and sharing. So please feel free to put that in the chat or in the Whova app for folks who are maybe not able to make it today. And I hope that this has also been a time as you seek to live into and navigate your call into vocational ministry and leadership in the face of structural oppression. But just remember, if you walk away from today, remember this: you are called, you are beloved, and your discernment journey along the path of following God's will in your life is uniquely yours. And if you'd like to chat more about vocation, discernment, seminary, or life in general, please message me on Whova or email me directly at grant.swanson@garrett.edu. And this PowerPoint presentation is on the event page, so please go through it. There were a lot of links you saw there. And I just hope that this can be a time of life-giving work as you go forward from here. So before we get to a time of question and answer, let's close in an attitude of prayer. God with us. Thank you for the gift and promise of your eternal presence with us as we navigate unjust paths. And as we pursue your call in our lives, thank you not only for your presence, but for the communities of support and care in which you have led us into and have created around us, even here today. May we continue to seek your will in our lives, discerning and pursuing our unique call to vocational ministry, and give us strength to live into our divine belovedness as your creations in your image, today, tomorrow, and evermore. Amen. So I did not leave as much time for questions as I was hoping. We have just 4 minutes here, but I'll run over to the Q&A. I don't see any questions there right now, but anybody have any questions before we conclude today? Well, I know that there's probably a lot for you to chew on, particularly in the vocational discernment exercise. And as you go on from today, I hope that as you're continuing to mull and chew on this, please reach out anytime. Talking with people about their vocation is my jam, whether it's about seminary or not. I would love to chat. George, yes, thank you. Whova app. Let me pull that up. One question: what is the value of staying in a denomination while it wrestles with a way forward? When is it time to leave? I think that for me, this comes down to there not being a right way and it being deeply personal for you. For me, I actually grew up in a denomination that is very transparent about being exclusive. So part of my journey in faith and having familiarity with evangelicalism led me to a place where I felt called to be involved in the messiness of the Methodist Church's active question about inclusivity. But I have just as many friends and colleagues who that is a toxic space where they cannot be, that brings harm to them. And they are feeling called to denominations who have answered that question in the fully inclusive realm and are wanting to do their ministry in those spaces. So I think it does come down to, where are you called? If you are called to be involved in that and know your boundaries for safety, go for it. If you're called and you see these boundaries and say, no, I'm out, that is fine too. The problem is the unjust system, not the ways in which we engage with it. And about openness, how do you know to be openness? Once again, I think that is also a personal calling. I felt called to be forthright about my marriage through the ordination process. I've had colleagues who felt called to maneuver that differently. And I know people have opinions about those different approaches, but I think once again, the problem is the unjust system and how you feel called to maneuver that in discernment with God and in conversations with your support systems. That is going to be the best way forward. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much for joining. Please email me. I would love to continue this conversation. Thank you for stopping by, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and conference.